either because they're linked to some truly horrific events, involved subjects the company choose not to discuss, the person in question was incredibly controversial, or some other reasons. WWE have chosen to not acknowledge each and every one of the following wrestler deaths. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 wrestler deaths WWE completely no-sells. Number 10. Nancy Benois. Lost to the crimes of her husband, Nancy Woman Benoit's legacy doesn't get discussed enough, lest it bring to the fore the double murder-suicide case, and conversations WWE hope will one day go away forever. A gifted valet from an era when such a role was one of the important ones in the industry, Nancy was an instantly alluring presence alongside a vast array of performers, from real-life ex-husband Kevin Sullivan to Doom, the Sandman, Ric Flair, and eventually Chris Benoit himself. Now, Benoit will be mentioned again in this list, but just so you know, he won't be receiving his own entry as we keep the spotlight on those whose legacies his terrible crimes had a knock-on effect on. Nancy's resume speaks to her diversity. She slotted effortlessly into the careers of her clients and was a constant threat from ringside. An effortless on-screen manipulator, her character found new and dynamic ways to mesh with the ones she lined up with, and those she feuded against, and often without significant promo time. A subtle performer in an era where such skills weren't always rewarded. Screaming promos and physical interjections weren't often required for women to do the necessary damage. Number 9. Johnny Grunge. Johnny Grunge only had a cup of coffee in WWE, and that figurative mug of boiling liquid was smashed all over his face during a drubbing from the acolytes alongside partner Rocco Rock. But his links to the most controversial figure in the company's history were another reason why his passing was neither big in the moment nor discussed much after the fact. Grunge, real name Mike Durham, was an Atlanta neighbor of Chris Benoit and was said to have supported him in the initial aftermath of Eddie Guerrero's untimely passing, until he also died young just 4 months later. Durham was just 39 when he passed away as a result of complications with sleep apnea. There were also suggestions he shared more than just an in-ring history and out-of-the-ring bond with Benoit. Durham allegedly also kept company with Dr. Phil Astin, the medic who was later sentenced to 10 years in prison for illegally distributing prescription drugs as well as other charges. Number 8. Bam Bigelow. Celebrated in small doses at best for what was once considered the best celebrity match ever before the bizarre current golden era was ushered in midway through the 2010s, Bam Bigelow's life, death, and legacy have all been curiously left alone since his 2007 passing. Twice in like a lion and out like a lamb during his 87 to 88 and 92 to 95 stints with the organization, it'd be one thing to speculate that perhaps those with links to WWE higher-ups over the decades remembered not meshing well with him. But far too many burned bridges have been rebuilt to simplify it as a game of petty politics. The timing and nature of his death may well be the biggest factor, you know. Hall of Fame spots don't seem to be in high supply for those that passed away at relatively young ages during the devastating spree of deaths during the 2000s. Stories like Bama's became too common. Combinations of broken bodies, drugs, failures to adjust to life out of the spotlight, and shoddy aftercare from the industry saw names going into the triple figures going too soon. Bigelow's story covered snatches of all of that, and within months of his passing, the aforementioned Benoit tragedy drew inquests that focused more on quantity of fatalities than qualities of the human beings involved. And the same could be said for number 7, Bryan Adams. Bryan Adams died in August 2007 with dangerous levels of drugs in his system at just 43 years old. And having seen similar stories elsewhere in this list, you'd be forgiven for feeling numb to the familiar facts and figures around the passing. The former Crush's unique contributions to the industry couldn't be touched then, and certainly wouldn't be now. Less than 2 months removed from the Benoit tragedy was the wrong time to expect a panicked WWE to do the right thing and isolate his life and contributions for praise. They were in severe damage control mode and badly losing a PR war against the media, actually taking all the misdeeds slightly seriously for once. It It's a shame Adam's last WWE match was as part of Chronic against the Brothers of Destruction in 2001. All four men were criminally useless at Unforgiven 2001, but lumbering lifers Kane and The Undertaker weren't ever going to take any of the flack for it, were they? In 5 separate incarnations of the Crush character, Adams was a 1990s staple with a brilliant look and cartoonishly entertaining brawling style. He's missed, they all are. Right, let's throw a little bit of positivity into this list just for a moment. I want to know right now, what is your favorite Crush moment? Let me know in the comments. Number 6, Test. Andrew Martin, the artist formerly known as Test, died when he was just 33 years old. 33. That's the headline of the story, even if the rest makes familiar viewing. He passed away in 2009, long before WWE's wellness policy had been in effect long enough to help slow death rates, along with changing habits and lifestyles outside the ring. Based on the hundreds that left too soon throughout the 2000s, it appeared as though the hedonistic 1980s and 1990s were there to be blamed. But Martin was a late arrival to the scene at the back end of 1998, and a distressingly early departure from this mortal coil. Once again, the pieces slotted too well into place for WWE to own up and admit this was yet again the same uncomplicated puzzle. Excesses of various kinds had claimed this man during his life until they claimed it outright. Test died of an accidental overdose of pain medication, and further investigation after the fact revealed CTE too. Wrestling was the primary contributor once again, and as the self-imposed custodian of the industry, WWE simply looked the other way. If you want to watch even more of this fascinating What Culture Wrestling stuff, then hit that subscribe button down below for even more of these videos on your screen. Number 5, Mike Awesome. Did the over-acknowledgement of a bad, though in hindsight relatively innocuous, thing Mike Awesome did in his career have something to do with the silence around his death? And did these supposedly incendiary actions akin at very least to Medusa binning the belt, or Shane Douglas throwing the NWA one down years before that, not warrant more attention with the odd wry smile and happy memory in a tribute piece to the man? Well, not according to WWE. The former ECW champion infamously jumped to WCW while holding the gold in 2000 because he wanted to be paid for a living, and the doomed Atlanta outfit failed him just like they did everybody else as they spiraled towards doom. WWE did no better, and Awesome's last major contribution in 2005 was remembered more for Joey Styles heaping such scorn on him that he discussed what it might be like when Awesome died. We all found out the answer to that when the Gladiator took his own life in 2007. Suicide is anything but painless, folks, and that is a conversation the market leader likes to avoid. Number 4, Art Barr. Prodigious and problematic talent, Art Barr never wrestled for any incarnation of World Wrestling Entertainment over his short firecracker of a career, but his electrifying in-ring legacy was in safer hands when Eddie Guerrero was still alive. As Los Gringos Locos, the pair had a beloved run in AAA as white-hot heels, peaking with a Hair vs. Mask 2 out of 3 Falls match against Octagon and El Hijo del Santo at the company's co-branded Super Show When Worlds Collide in 1994. Having had the best match on a critically acclaimed show that brought them into direct contact with WCW and WWE eyes watching from afar, the two were within touching distance of the North American mainstream until Barr passed away just 17 days after the classic encounter. He died asleep with his young child in his arms, body full of things ultimately stopping it from being able to function. His influence remains everywhere to this day. The Frog Splash as a lucha staple starts with Barr upgrading Too Cold Scorpio's variant, and the Gringo's gear has been adopted by Rey and Dominic Mysterio at various points over the years. It's easier and cleaner to shower former WWE champion Guerrero with the love, but back when he was still with us, Latino Heat himself regularly paid all that adoration forward to his former partner. Number 3, Mabel. Vince McMahon loved Mabel, well, for a bit, making it all the way to a SummerSlam main event by virtue of a King of the Ring tournament win in 1995. Nelson Fraser Jr. benefited from being a naturally big guy during a time when McMahon didn't want to risk pushing artificially inflated ones. But his men-on-a-mission misadventures between 1993 and 1996 weren't the only times he plied his trade on the industry's biggest stage. Returning returning in various guises between 1998 and 2008. Fraser was a reliable pickup because of, or in spite of, his gargantuan frame, and was just as adept lacking around as the world's largest love machine as he was flicking the monster switch as Big Daddy V. That dude used to terrify me. He lost his life to a heart attack at 43 in 2014, and high blood pressure and diabetes had been a problem up to that point. But for so many matches and moments of several eras, to die with him still scans as strange. A thrown-out wrongful death lawsuit from Fraser's widow Cassandra in 2015 can't have done wonders for the preservation of his name in the moment, but a complete scrubbing ever since reads as a depressing overreaction. Number 2. Shaun OHare. Shaun OHare's 2003 Devil's Advocate vignette was celebrated to such an extent that when he passed away in 2014, the decade-plus gap had elevated him to the position of WWE's biggest ever missed opportunity. The segments were superbly performed and offered a bit of nuance during an era that would have considered it a dirty word. But much of the hype came from the athlete lurking inside the black suit. OHare was cut and jacked, but flew, looked, and felt as dangerous as the new gimmick, and was a WCW talent with miles on the clock. It not working out felt like the latest failure of a system chewing up and spitting out talent, rather than more of a mutual thing between an unfinished idea and a performer not best suited for the role when the bell rang. Perhaps that's why WWE never really made any kind of mention of his passing when he died by suicide at just 43. Internally, they'd actually been aware of his struggles. OHare had used the company's sponsored rehab service 6 times in 6 years between 2008 and his death. That reflects their earnest efforts to help, if not to pay particular tribute after the fact. And number 1, Ludvig Borger. Tony Ludvig Borger Helmer had a relatively short WWE run between 1993 and 1994, but everything pre-monoculture left a deeper footprint, and the Hellraiser from Helsinki's dalliance with the top of the card was no different. What did leave some long-standing damage on the world he left in 2010 was his collection of extremely controversial political views. A former Finnish politician, he'd espoused bigoted views as a public figure on several occasions, and shockingly had an SS tattoo on the back of his calf that Jim Ross reasonably commented should have been an obstacle in hiring him to begin with. Between that, the brushed-aside nature of the run in the years since, and the nature of Halmer's passing, he died by suicide at 47, which typically wobbles the most corporate of WWE's executives lest it kickstart conversations they don't want to have. Borger may as well have never even existed, really. That he was briefly considered as a WrestleMania title challenger is something Vince McMahon himself would no-sell, let alone the company at large. Now continue your YouTube journey with What Culture Wrestling by tapping on another video like this 10 wrestlers who completely no-sold finishers one, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.